Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Hope you guys are doing good today. Just having a nice day today, pretty chill. Um, Day off, feeling a lot better. Hopefully you guys are off today and enjoying your day off. Thought I would jump in and talk a little bit about Christmas, you know, since it is December 25th. It is Christmas time, and a lot of Christians and unbelievers are partaking in the holiday, the day off. Is that a little hypocritical if you're not a Christian? Some people think so. Some people think that if you're not a Christian, you have no real business celebrating Christmas, right? I've kind of heard a lot about that this week myself. So I wanted to kind of jump into Christmas. Like, where does it actually come from? Well, in Britannica, the Encyclopedia Britannica, maybe I can share the screen so we can look at it together and see what it says here. All right. So we've got, why is Christmas in December? So it says Christmas, the holiday commemorating the birth of Jesus Christ, is celebrated by a majority of Christians on December 25th in the Gregorian calendar. But early Christians did not celebrate his birth, and no one knows on which date Jesus was actually born. Some scholars believe that the actual date was in the early spring, placing it closer to Easter, the holiday commemorating his resurrection. The origins of the holiday and its December date lie in the ancient Greco-Roman world, as commemorations probably began sometimes in the second century. There are at least three possible origins for the December date. The Roman Christian historian Sextus Julius Africanus dated Jesus' conception to March 25th, which is the same date upon which he held that the world was created, which after 9 months in his mother's womb would result in a December 25th birth. In the third century, the Roman Empire, which at the time had not adopted Christianity, celebrated the rebirth of the unconquered son Sol Invictus on winter solstice, but also followed the popular Roman festival called the Saturnalia, during which people feasted and exchanged gifts. It was also the birthday of the Indo European deity Mithra, a god of light and loyalty, whose cult was at the time growing popular among Roman soldiers. The church in Rome began formally celebrating Christmas on December 25th in 336 during the reign of the Emperor Constantine. Christianity, the effective religion of the empire. Some have speculated that choosing this date had the political motive of weakening the established pagan celebrations. The date was not widely accepted in the Eastern Empire, where January 6th had been favored for another half century, and Christmas did not become a major Christian festival until the ninth century. Wow. So it looks like Christmas may have had its origins in pagan celebrations. I've always been told this. I used to be a Jehovah's Witness. So of course Jehovah's Witnesses do not celebrate Christmas for these reasons. It's correlated with a lot of these pagan rituals and ancient pagan celebrations, right? And so for that reason, and a lot of Christians today feel the same way, or a lot of people just are ignorant of that fact, or they don't think it really matters, right? But if it doesn't matter, then you shouldn't really get mad or have an issue with other people that celebrate Christmas, even if they don't believe in Jesus Christ, right? Now, you may say that's a little hypocritical. That's your opinion. But as we can see, history it is very questionable whether Christmas really had a Christian origin. So what I did is I brought up other apologists and scholars who actually think that Christmas does not have a pagan origin. They look at this totally different. They think this is entirely a Christian holiday and it has nothing to do with what pagans did. That just kind of correlates with stuff. So we're going to look at Mr. Wes Huff on this because he kind of brings this to light. He is a scholar. So we're going to listen to him. And if you are interested in Christian scholarship, his page is there. You should like and subscribe to his channel. But he has a show here called Christmas Isn't Pagan, and here's why. I'll just start it where he kind of gets into the nuts and bolts. So here we go.
Again, the sources we do have for the origins of the Christmas tree aren't even remotely pagan. One potential comes from the story of St. Boniface from the 8th century, when he's said to have cut down the sacred oak tree that the locals had dedicated to Thor. When he wasn't killed by lightning, he's said to have pointed to the fir tree and dedicated it to Christ. Some scholars have hypothesized that the tradition arose from the paradise trees in the 1500s. A paradise tree was an evergreen tree decorated with fruit to represent the tree of life in the Garden of Eden, and a play telling the Genesis story would be done around the paradise tree. The plays were typically held on December 24th, and then, as the fruit was taken off the tree remained, and it was then decorated for the next day in celebration for Christmas. These trees set up in people's houses would remind them of the Garden of Eden on Christmas Eve and the restoration of Christ coming into the world, of the garden to come in the new heaven.
If a man really hated ads, here's what.
So he kind of has a different take on that particular part. I'm going to get back into sharing the video because he's not done yet. But I just wanted to kind of pause it there, especially during the commercial, just to let you know that it appears that there are other opinions, scholarly opinions about this. So let's continue on with his treatment of Christmas. Here we go.
There is also a famous story linked to the Protestant reformer Martin Luther, in which he is said during a winter evening stroll to have been overcome with the brilliance of the stars in the night sky, painting the background over the evergreen forests. In order to capture this moment, it is recorded that Luther cut down and erected a tree in the main hall of their house, covering its branches with lighted candles. Although the tradition was well known from that point on in Germany and dispersed parts of Europe, it was not practiced in Britain until the 19th century. When Queen Victoria married her German cousin Prince Albert, the custom was brought into the household of the British royal family. From then on, it was associated with royalty, and wealthier middle-class families soon followed suit with the tradition during the holiday season. Over here in Canada, where I live, it had been adopted as a tradition just prior to the 1700s, where we have records of Brunswick soldiers stationed in Quebec who are said to have decorated large fir trees with candles and fruit during the holiday season. Now, it's true that ancient pagans across Europe used trees in certain practices and ceremonies. This much is a true fact. However, none of these practices resembles what eventually became the Christmas tree, and none of them can be tied to fir or pine trees specifically. Aside from the fact that by the time that Christmas trees became popular and associated with Christmas itself, virtually all of these pagan worship practices in Europe were long dead and forgotten. There is no evidence of a direct link, and if the most we can connect is a parallel correlation, then that's pretty weak.
All right. So there you have it. Mr. Huff here is making the claim that by the time these celebrations happen, there was no real widespread knowledge of where these things came from. It just happens to be that there's this correlation. But is that really a good argument to dispel the notion that that Christmas has pagan origins? Is that really false? So I've got another video here, and I want to present this as well. Um, let's go ahead and pull this up. And this is from Breaking in the Habit. This is from a few years back, and he's going to be speaking on Christmas as well. So let's check this out and see what he has to say.
For many people, December 25th is the most holy and joyous date of the year because it is Jesus' birthday. Of course, many people are wrong. The fact of the matter is that in Jesus' time, people didn't have calendars or watches like they do today, nor were they particularly concerned with such things as birthdays, and so no one actually knows when Jesus was born. What's even more surprising, though, is that no one even knows for sure why December 25th was chosen by the early Christians as the commemoration date. There are theories, yes, but no clear answers. So what are these theories and how does it affect our lives as Christians today? This is Catholicism in Focus. Know the actual date of Jesus' birth shouldn't come as a surprise to many people. Jesus was born to insignificant parents in a backwater town on the outskirts of an ancient nation. Records like that simply weren't kept like they are today. What might come as a surprise, though, is the fact that the first official record in Rome of Christmas being celebrated on December 25th doesn't appear until the year 336.
Hey guys, did you know some drivers are ditching their car insurance and they're doing this?
36, as in 300 years after the death of Christ. There's evidence that Christians celebrated Christmas as early as the late 2nd century, but the date varied widely over place and time. It was not until decreed by Rome in the mid-4th century that the entire Western Church celebrated on the same date. It's for this reason that the prevailing theory for many years was that the date for Christmas was chosen by Christians as a way to supersede pagan holidays. You see, in the Roman calendar, December 25th was the feast of Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun, as well as the finale of the week-long festival of Saturnalia, a commemoration of the passing of the winter solstice, the time when the days begin to get longer and light returns to the darkness.
So he's sort of reiterating what we read at the top here regarding the Encyclopedia Britannica, the facts about Saturnalia, the reason Rome adopted the holiday in order to supersede the pagan holidays that were going on at the time. And, Emperor Constantine making Christianity the national religion. So this is sort of so far seems to be consistent with that information we read.
It was a time of gift giving, constant partying, and going door to door singing while naked. Christians of the time would have had no trouble finding parallels between these feasts and the worship of their own God, Jesus, who was described as the rising sun and the light in the darkness, and would have certainly wanted to reappropriate the debauchery of the Roman holidays for something a bit more virtuous. Being that the Feast of Christmas became an official Roman holiday in the time of Constantine, a convert to Christianity, many over the years have suggested that December 25th was chosen precisely as a means of enculturation. They took pagan customs and Christianized them in order to gain converts.
Enculturation. And I've oftentimes said that this is to the credit of Christianity. What makes it such a successful religion, why it's the number one religion as far as numbers in history, is because of its ability to do exactly that, to adapt into different cultures around the world. It's able to survive the different times as things change. It just has that built-in power to it to actually, fit into different cultures. It's very culture friendly, and it's a conversion religion, and so it's able to grow in numbers in that way.
Which would be pretty on brand for the church. Rather than abolish local customs, we have a long history of trying to find the truth in pagan religions and build upon it. This theory, called the history of religions, gained a lot of ground in the 18th and 19th centuries as the field of comparative religion was taking off. Some have used this as evidence against the Catholic Church, claiming that it was paganized in the process, while most recognize it as the Church Fathers' effective use of evangelization, meeting the Romans in their own situation. It's a simple and coherent theory, which is why it's remained the predominant assumption for the last 200 years, and many sources claim it to be fact without question. This is why the date was chosen, they say. Except, the simple answer of history rarely tells the whole story. As many scholars have pointed out, the fact that Rome made December 25th the official date of Christmas in 336 doesn't mean that this date wasn't firmly established in other places first. While the date of Christmas varied from place to place, the celebration on December 25th goes as far back as the early 3rd century. In around 202, St. Hippolytus wrote in a commentary on Daniel that the celebration of Christmas was in fact December 25th, and in 221, the Christian traveler Julius Africanus wrote that Jesus was conceived on March 25th, 9 months before December 25th. Over the course of the 3rd century, the observance of Christmas on this date grew in prominence, becoming largely uncontested by the early 4th century.
So it seems to be a political thing. It seems, as usual with religion, especially with Christianity, traditions, beliefs were sort of forged in by the church. Very interesting and very powerful information. Whether this is absolutely true is debatable. There are scholars like the Wes Huff, who I mentioned, and we'll go back to see more of what he's talking about on this matter. So I'm going to kind of jump back at what he was at his video to kind of talk about these things. Just a second here. There we go.
Correlation does not equal causation, and along with trees, pagans also had religious buildings, songs they sang, almsgiving, prayers. Some Egyptian superstitions also included the images of crosses and fish. By the same logic, we better get rid of all those things in modern Christianity as well. The problem we run into is that you can draw all sorts of parallels with things pagans did and do, and practices we see in Christianity, but once again, correlation does not equal causation, and to draw the connection between a pagan root into a modern Christmas practice, we need to be able to draw a clear and definitive straight line. That just simply cannot be done with all the examples we see within modern Christmas practices. This also goes, by the way, for wreaths, mistletoe, and even Santa Claus. You might have a problem with commercialization of all of these things, and I can understand that. But to try and then say that they're pagan is just a jump in logic that seems to, at best, be silly to me.
So what do you think? Do you think that this is does he have a point here? Is Christian really not a pagan holiday, despite what most historians and scholars have been saying for hundreds of years on the topic? What do you think? I posted up a little link here in case you want to jump in and we can discuss it. If you want to add something to it, you're more than welcome, or post something in a comment and we can review that. But yeah, let's keep on going, see what he says.
Now, some will grant that and simply say, well, they might not be pagan, but scripture clearly condemns such practices. I mean, look at Jeremiah 10, verses 2-4. This is what the Lord says: do not learn the ways of the nations, or be terrified by signs in the heavens, though the nations are terrified by them. For the practices of the people are worthless. They cut a tree out of a forest, and a craftsman shapes it with his chisel. They adorn it with silver and gold. They fasten it with a hammer and nails, so it will not totter. The argument then is that this is God forbidding decorating a Christmas tree, so doing so is a sin which Scripture and God condemns. The problem is that this verse, when placed in the context of what Jeremiah is actually talking about, completely debunks it. What Jeremiah is talking about is a craftsman who is cutting down a tree and carving a graven idol out of the wood. The very next verse mockingly compares what is being done by these pagans with a scarecrow. In other words, just as a scarecrow is a mock representation of a person to scare away birds in a field, but cannot move, talk, or has no life in and of itself, neither does the wooden idol being made by the craftsman.
So I always find this really funny. It seems sort of petty. Why would God care what people do to venerate nature? Is God that, does he get really sad when people venerate the things created rather than he who created all things? Does he really get angry? Is he really going to be vengeful and wrathful about such things and send you to hell for these practices? Now, I understand ancient people used to separate themselves. The Hebrews separated themselves from the nations in all kinds of ways through their laws and, cleanliness law, kosher laws, and things like that. And they were set aside from the nations as God's chosen people. And so it seems like they got a little anal about a lot of things that pagans were doing and other religions and people of the nations were doing. That's my only take on it. If you have another take, feel free to jump in or chime in. But I just always felt that that was kind of weird that God Almighty, the creator of the heavens and the earth, would really care about, what we do with trees and stuff. Kind of weird.
Your brain lights up like a TV.
Let me just skip through these commercials. Here we go.
The verse specifically mocks these wooden figures' lack of ability to speak or walk. Why? Because they're being carved with mouths and feet, yet they're still a piece of lifeless wood. This wouldn't make any sense if what is being talked about in context looked like a tree. And that's besides the point that it would make no sense for God to be telling the ancient Israelites to avoid making Christmas trees, which wouldn't be done for thousands of years in the future, and thus have no understandable application for Jeremiah's immediate audience. Many people in the comment section of my social media posts also very strongly argued that because the Bible never specifically says we should celebrate Jesus' birthday, therefore it is wrong. To this, I would say a few things. First, Jesus himself traveled to Jerusalem in John chapter 10 to celebrate the Feast of Dedication, better known today as Hanukkah. This is a celebration that came from the 2nd century BC, commemorating the recovery of Jerusalem and subsequent dedication of the Second Temple at the beginning of the Maccabean Revolt. This is not a celebration the Bible says for God's people to do. It comes from the time between the last book of the Old Testament, Malachi, and the first book of the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew. Yet Jesus has no problem traveling to Jerusalem to celebrate this particular event. Despite it not being commanded in Scripture, it is fully consistent with Scripture.
Well, that's the point. I think it was a celebration of Jewish culture and so forth. But birthdays, did the Jewish people celebrate birthdays? That's a question that's worth exploring, because Christmas is a celebration of the birth of Jesus. Did the early Jews celebrate birthdays? Why and why not? After all, they were separating themselves from the nations around them, and birthdays didn't really focus on the Jews as a people or a culture or Jehovah or Yahweh. Birthdays were mainly focused on celebrating oneself. And this does have pagan origins. And so a lot of people may argue that Christmas probably wasn't celebrated by early Christians for that reason. But let's continue.
Why wouldn't you make a celebration out of an event that represented God's work in the world and the preservation and redemption of his people? In a very similar way, why wouldn't we celebrate the incarnation and the birth of Christ? There are, of course, so many other things I could talk about related to Christmas, but let me just wrap up with a few particular comments. Once again, there are no straight lines drawn from pagan practices to modern Christmas celebrations. Those just aren't there. At best,
So yeah, it seems like at best then this is just up to the people to kind of decide whether it's right or wrong, like a matter of conscience, it seems.
We can draw correlations to a handful of things pagans did, but no causation that these things impacted or were directly copied by Christians in the development of Christmas.
But he does go on, earlier he was saying that pagans did celebrate Saturnalia, December 25th. And so would it really be hypocritical of non-Christians to celebrate Christmas? Really, when there are older traditions that do correlate to Christmas, right?
The same sort of methodology is often employed for Jesus mythicists when they try to draw connections between things like ancient deity figures and what Jesus did. And ironically, this is exactly what some people in my social media comment section did do. Unfortunately, whether we're talking about the stories of Jesus in the Gospels or the traditions of modern Christmas, there really isn't any credibility between Nimrod, Tammuz, Horus, Attis, or anyone else that was an ancient deity figure. Those are at best silly parallels that could apply to anyone or anything, and at worst, they're simply made up from thin air.
Yeah, that's very true. And which is one reason that I don't ever make those sort of arguments. Those arguments, however, do hold weight with very fundamentalist Christians, especially like Jehovah's Witnesses, who did not celebrate Christmas because of those correlations. In fact, they would think that it was Satan who was using Christmas as a way of getting Christendom to worship him by adopting these evil pagan practices. So this is one way to look at things, but it's from a very fundamentalist view. So in a way, when you charge, you're kind of doing the reverse when you say that, unless you're an unbeliever, you can't really celebrate Christmas because you're a hypocrite. Well, not really. It doesn't really work that way, in my opinion, because as we see, Christmas does have correlations with a lot of different pagan practices that go way beyond, the Jewish celebrations. So, anyways, we're going to jump right back into the other video.
Which is interesting because the celebration of the sun god on December 25th wasn't instituted by the Roman Emperor Aurelian until the year 274. This is well after Christians had been using the date for their own feast. More importantly, this would have been in a time when Christians had no interest in blending with pagan culture. Besides intermittent persecution, the 3rd century was actually a time of separation for Christians as they worked to develop their own distinct identity. Synchronization in this time just doesn't make sense. It's for this reason that scholars of late have rejected the common history of religions theory and posed their own, the calculations theory. Relying heavily on patristic sources, this theory suggests that the date of Christmas, at least in its original practice, came about completely independent of Roman culture, determined rather by calculating Jesus' birth based on when he was conceived. While this might seem to make the question even more difficult, there was a commonly held belief in the early church that Jesus was conceived and died on the same date, that his incarnation represented perfect unity, celebrating creation and recreation at one and the same time. Dating the crucifixion was not exactly a science either, but there was far more evidence to go on than his birth. There were disputes, as one would expect, with many in the West suggesting March 25th, traditionally the vernal equinox, and fittingly, the date rabbis believe God created the world, while those in the East calculated this date to be April 6th. Add 9 months to these dates, and you calculate Christmas to be either December 25th or January 6th, dates that have served as the remembrance of Jesus' birth since the 3rd century. What's particularly fascinating about this theory is that given the growing prominence of Christians by the late 3rd century, many scholars have begun to suggest that the history of religions theory does have some merit, it's just backwards. Christians didn't pick December 25th to Christianize the Romans. The Romans, seeing the power of such an important Christian feast, instituted Sol Invictus in 274 to Romanize the Christians. Mind blown. So, which theory makes the most sense? that the church, seeing the debauchery of the Roman religion, decided to normalize its own celebration to coincide with the pagans in an attempt to evangelize them, or that this celebration had been developing independently over time, and when Christians recognized the coincidence, they reinterpreted the significance of that day. Based on what we read from the historical accounts, there's no reason to believe that either theory is fully right or fully wrong. It's clear that Christians were celebrating Christmas even on December 25th, long before any direct interaction with the Roman religion. They either genuinely believed that Jesus was born on that date, or chose it because of theological reasons, and while there were many different opinions, one did emerge naturally prior to any Roman declaration. At the same time, nothing ever develops in a vacuum. Christians from the 4th century on were well aware of the Roman practices and knew that their own feast had similar themes. Theologians like Augustine noted how fitting it was that Christmas would be celebrated on the same date and how it could be used for the purposes of evangelization. The church very well could have had a long-established tradition for that date, but only chose to officially normalize it when the opportunity for evangelization presented itself.
Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So it could be that the Romans would seek to sort of paganize or unify the empire by accepting December 25th as the celebration of Jesus' birth. Not necessarily that it was picked by authority, but they had been doing this all along. And yeah, Christians were at that point in the 4th century trying to disassociate themselves with pagans. So it seems that the reason that date was picked was probably tradition that goes back for theological reasons. And I could see the advantage politically for the Romans to go ahead and make that a state holiday, because it just so happens, coincidentally, that the pagans and the Christians both celebrated that day. So either way, you can see that pagans have a right for celebrating that day, as do the Christians, if you take that view. So I don't want to hear any more Christians telling me that you can't celebrate Christmas because you're not a Christian, that it's hypocrisy. No, I can just say I'm a pagan. And that's the reason I do it. I think it's all pretty silly, if you ask me, really. It's kind of petty in my view, especially when you talk about the nature of an all-knowing, all-powerful God caring about things like that. But I came up, like I said, under Jehovah's Witnesses back when I did start to have theological questions and wanted to learn about different religions. I came upon Jehovah's Witnesses, and they spelled out pretty much the same thing. Of course, I think their view at the time was that the Romans instituted the celebration because it was already a pagan holiday. And so they just wanted to make all the Christians fall in line with the pagans as a national holiday to unify the empire. Could have been true, but it seems like from what both of these guys are saying, it's very possible the Christians were already celebrating the birth of Jesus at the 25th. Question is, what is it about birthdays being celebrated by the Jews? Was that a thing? Did early Hebrews celebrate birthdays? I'm going to plug this into a search, and it came right up. So, of course, we've got the Jewish Encyclopedia. So let's see what they say about birthdays. Present that. Okay. Birthday by Cyrus Adler, S. Rubin. There are no positive data in the Bible or in rabbinical literature concerning birthday festivals among the ancient Jews. This silence on the subject is, however, no warrant for the conclusion that the Jews altogether abstained from following a custom which was general among the Egyptians, Persians, Syrians, and Greeks. even if not common among the people, yet kings and princes probably practiced it, following the custom of their heathen contemporaries. Birthday festivals were not considered by the rabbis as hukak hagoyim, goyim, customs of the heathen, although Lightfoot held a contrary opinion. So, biblical references. A close study of the biblical text show that the Bible is not altogether wanting in reference to the subject. For while it lacks positive accounts, it contains passages from which it may be inferred that the custom of remembering birthday anniversaries was not wholly unknown among the Jews. The day of our king, Hosea 5, on which the princes made the king sick with bottles of wine, and the king himself stretched out his hand with scorners, alludes more probably to a birthday festival than to a solemn occasion, such as the anniversary of his installation, which would have been observed for more decorum. Josephus of Antioch, I believe, talks about this. Birthdays might not have been celebrated by the common people with great solemnity, yet they did not pass wholly unnoticed and were remembered by congratulations as in modern times. Jeremiah not only cursed the day of his birth, but wished that it should not be blessed, as though such had been the custom. And then, as Jehovah's Witnesses, we looked at Job. It is said of Job, and he cursed his day. The emphatic and determining expression of his day implies the idea that he, like everyone else, had a certain day of the year singled out for certain purpose, which we learned further was the anniversary of his birth. Yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses kind of alluded to that. And also with the beheading of John the Baptist, which was done during a birthday celebration. So birthdays were kind of looked at not with celebration, but always something bad or something negative about it. So in this way, Jehovah's Witnesses sort of infer that God frowns on birthdays, right? And so they sort of also sort of extrapolated that the Jews probably didn't celebrate birthdays, and so why would Jesus's birth be celebrated, making Christmas an entirely irrelevant thing to celebrate, even having correlation to pagan holidays and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of the story I came up with when I was studying with that cult. So yeah, it's just kind of petty. I agree that with Sammy here, petty exactly what it is. Yeah, it's petty. But that's what religions do, in my opinion. They become very petty to separate themselves out, like a selling point. Like one religion, one denomination of Christianity is the correct one, and so they're trying to get followers into their church because it's different than, say, the Catholics, or different than, say, the Jehovah's Witnesses, or now you've got the Mormons, or you've got the Pentecostals. Everyone has their own sort of slant on that stuff. Everybody's trying to be, the top dog, or an elitist, as Sammy says here, with regard to worship of God. And that's always kind of turned me off about organized religion, is it's always a power play. It's always ripe with con men, and it's a power grab, and it's a way to exploit ignorant, poor people, get them not to think and study on their own. Luckily, though, we have the internet. We can look this stuff up like we're doing today, kind of looking at these different videos and seeing what what the encyclopedias have to say on the matter. And yeah, religion ruined God. There's a lot of atheists and people who were just so turned off by religion. I was one when I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I came to learn about philosophy and spirituality and epistemology, especially. I sort of turned my way against God. I saw the notion of God is kind of unfounded and sort of exploitive, like this idea who no one really is defining with any, real rigorousness, only that, oh, God is that guy in the Bible, in the beginning, God, it's like it just assumes God, and it doesn't do anything. It just talks about this is the top um, deity, Yahweh, or whatever your God is, and it should be worshiped. It wants to be worshiped. God needs to be honored. And if you don't do these things correctly, God can get very petty about it, and God can hurt you spiritually and physically, even. And so, people, as you grow up and you become more, you know, rational minded, you get turned off by this. And it seems like the pagans may, in some cases, had a different view of God. They saw God as nature. My people come from Germanic tribes, but also Hawaiian. And so the Hawaiian side of me, they worship nature. And so I've learned a lot about that too. That they're earth people. They look at nature as the expression of God, and that God is kind of everything. That's why I sort of, and when I talk about God myself, I sort of describe myself as a pantheist in a way. Maybe even beyond that. Maybe it's something a little different that I believe. But I kind of see truth in all religions. I can see some truth in it, and I also see that God is everything. I kind of look at it that way, that God is not limited. God is non-local. He's not a localized thing. If God is anything, it's going to be reality itself. And this is something worthy of, for me, consideration and awe-inspiring, and even sort of directs me in a positive way. My higher self, my higher mind. And it's also sort of helpful too to think of myself as not outside of nature, but part of nature. And so God sort of exists through me, you know? And so I get to project reality, out there. So it comes back to me as either positive, negative, whatever my mind frame is. But that's just my own philosophy, my own spirituality that seems to work for me. I wouldn't dare impose it on other people or think that my thoughts about God and these sort of concepts are absolute truth in any way. You know what I mean? It's just the way I like to think about things. We all are wired up a little different, you know what I mean? Um but yeah, Christianity has a long history of being petty about a lot of things. And Christmas, holidays, things like this is part of that. Um, and while it's interesting, I don't think that it's bad to celebrate this stuff, whether you're a believer or not. And hey, I guess Christmas, in a way, you could argue that it's actually good for the economy. It gets people out here buying stuff and fueling the economy, if that's your thing, right? Or you can look at it as a bad thing. It's too commercialized. It promotes greed and makes people, materialistic, which takes away from, spiritual paths or inner work, things like that. For me, I kind of lean that way. I don't care much about Christmas and holidays. I just think they're just things that humans come up with for many reasons, right? And I think that being attached to holidays and things like that can be a great source of suffering and pain. When suppose you don't have a job and you can't provide presents for your children, and you're so attached to this holiday, it can destroy you, it can depress you. And I think there's statistics out here that say that a lot of suicides happen on Christmas, a lot of depression, a lot of bad things come out of this holiday because people take it so serious. And is that really a good thing? Is that really a godly sort of thing? No, I think it's more like a human thing. Um, and it's really sad that people give it so much power in their life, that you could even correlate, things like suicides during the holidays. I mean, I'm looking at something right here. Let's see if I can share my screen. We can take a look at that. Let's see. Um, where it says that suicides actually don't spike during the holidays. Many stories this year debunk the myth, including some that mention the CDC or the Annenberg Public Policy Center. We were heartened to see that our efforts have been cited by some of these news outlets, said Romer. Among these stories, How to Combat Holiday Blues, which ran on December 24th, 2022. While December sees the lowest suicide rates, according to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, the holidays often bring stressors that can trigger depression, anxiety, and loneliness. That's true, because if you give into it, if this is very important for you, it can be a trigger. It can be just another thing you've put in your life to stress you the hell out. Then we hear here in a November 21st, 2022 story on a holiday stress mental health webinar hosted by a Los Angeles County supervisor. A writer for the Santa Clarita, California Signal said, while suicides have increased since the pandemic, suicides do not increase in rate during the holidays, according to the Centers of Disease Control. In fact, it actually decreases. So that's a good thing then. That was just a myth that I was familiar with. As a Jehovah's Witness, they used to tell us that all the time, that Christmas causes suicide, but then again, it's religion. They're going to lie. They're going to promote misinformation in order to get people away from other religious denominations and to sell you into their religion, right? So I always promoted that we should always fact check things, and I'm doing it right now. I'm looking at things that I'm saying and discussing the topic by listening to all sides. There's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy doing that. It's how you get a real wholesome view, holistic view of any topic. So anyways, I think I've kind of spoke too much about this already. I don't want to beat a dead horse on it. But in either case, whether you're celebrating or not, I hope you have a great day today. If you are celebrating Christmas like I am, happy, Merry Christmas. That's another thing I don't do. I don't get offended by people that say Merry Christmas to me. Okay. This is another way this society has become very petty and divisive. We're always looking at things to trigger each other. Christians telling me that I can't celebrate Christmas because I'm not a Christian. and or if you're a real Christian, you shouldn't celebrate Christmas because it's a pagan holiday. It's all very petty and it's just all bullshit for me. Just enjoy your life, people. Enjoy your day. Enjoy the holidays. Try not to be too stressed out about this stuff. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy your family, your loved ones. You know, you can do that on any day, not just Christmas. And that's where I stand on the matter. At any case, look, um, please like and subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing a lot more as far as content. I know that I've been sort of this channel has been kind of inactive for a long time because I haven't really paid a lot of attention. But me and my co-host Sophia, hope you're having a happy Christmas out there as well. She's going to join me next this coming Saturday, and we'll come up with another topic. We do that. And look, I've set up a little Patreon page. So if you want to, donate something to the channel, it'll help out a lot. I need to get more lighting and equipment and things like that. This would make it worth it if you can donate whatever you can to the cause. I would greatly appreciate it. I would like to grow the channel and have some really good numbers, a lot of subscribers, and then I could bring on really interesting guests and we can have a lot of these discussions and promote positive conversation and spirituality. So at any rate, guys, you guys have a wonderful Christmas, and we will be talking to you very soon. Sammy, Merry Festivus Dub, thank you so much. You as well, sweetie. And we will be in contact soon. So join me Saturday, 12 o'clock noon, and we will have another great discussion. Peace.